What's up guys, Kyle Mohr here for DJ Techtools and welcome back to my workshop. For today's tutorial I'm going to show you guys step by step how to mod guitar effects pedals for easy use in your DJ setup. So let's get started. Alright, before we get started, let's look at the pedals we'll be using. First we have the Electro Harmonix Freeze pedal, a digital reverb from Boss in the RV5, two pedals from Dwarfcraft Devices, the particle pedal from Red Panda, and last but not least, the Janus from Walrus Audio. Now let's look at our parts and supplies. We'll be using a ton of suger in this project. It's moldable glue that turns into rubber. Then we'll be using 3D filament from Hatchbox, 24mm arcade buttons from focusattack.com, mini arcade buttons, a relay PCB board from AMZ-FX, jumper wires, rubber feet for your enclosure, liquid electrical tape, some stain for your wood printed knobs. Now let's look at our tools. You're going to need a pliers set and some wire cutters. You need a drill with a few different drill bit sizes. You also need a stepping bit. This will help you from cracking your enclosure. Some WD-40, a soldering iron, some rosin core solder and soldering flux, a desoldering pump, a small screwdriver set, a box cutter, a screwdriver, and a 3D printed MIDI fighter faceplate, or we'll keep it old school and use a tape measure. Now let's look at the 3 steps. First, we'll need to remove the foot switch. Next, we'll have to drill the hole to add in the button. Then lastly, we'll have to solder the new button to the circuit board. First, let's start off with easy difficulty. For our first pedal mod, we'll be using the Freeze pedal from Electro Harmonix. What you'll need to do is remove the original foot switch. You can do this with a set of pliers or a wrench. Then remove the screws from the back of the pedal. You'll see on this one there's only 2 wires. It's because this is a momentary foot switch. Cut the wires, or you can desolder them. Strip the wires. And then as you can see, it's a small hole and it's really close to the circuit board. So when we enlarge it for the arcade button, we'll be using this 3D printed MIDI fighter faceplate. But if you don't have that, you can use a measuring tape and measure 1 inch. You want to make sure that the top of the hole is actually the original hole. You don't want to make it centered because you'll hit the circuit board. What you need to do is draw an outline of the hole to include the original hole, and then we'll also need a pilot hole for our center point. Next, we'll be using our stepping bit. This will help us get to our 24mm size. Now 24mm is just shy of 1 inch, and our bit is only labeled in inches. So we're going to mark it with some tape just to show where we are. Also use plenty of WD-40 between drilling. Please drill slowly and in short intervals. Now afterwards, you want to make sure to vacuum up all of these metal pieces because you don't want them stuck inside your enclosure or to cause any shorts. Now pop in your arcade button. Now you want to solder the original 2 wires to the arcade button and then bend them to make sure they fit in the enclosure and seal them up with some liquid electrical tape and even some suger. Now you can seal back up your pedal. We're going to replace the knob with a 3D printed moke knob. We'll be using Hatchbox filament with our XYZ printer. Now printers used to cost thousands of dollars, but this one only cost a couple hundred. So we'll be printing in many different types of filaments: wood, PLA, and ABS. You can see the different array of knobs we have, and we've also included some of the sketches in the article below that we use for the knobs. This printer actually also does laser engraving, so we laser engraved a few knobs as well. Alright, so now that we have our knob, we're going to top it off with some suger. pop it on your pedal, and now you have a nice chunky knob for your modded arcade button guitar effects pedal. Now, for part 2 of our easy pedals, we'll be using a digital reverb pedal from Boss. Now, there isn't as much room inside this pedal as you can see, so we won't be able to use our 24mm arcade buttons, so we'll be using mini arcade buttons. So mark your point, drill your pilot hole, make sure to vacuum things up, and let's remove the faceplate so we don't damage anything inside. Now we're going to pop out the momentary button that already exists for the pedal and clip it from the wires that are in there. Now again, it's only 2 wires, so we just need to resolder them some jumper cables since they don't come that far. Drill a larger hole in the front of the pedal, snap in your mini arcade button, then solder on the wires. Now you can cover some suger to make sure you don't have any connections touching the pedal, and then we can seal it back up. Then we're going to rip off the knobs, replace them with some chunkier 3D printed knobs, then plug it in and test it out. Alright, let's move on to medium difficulty. Now for medium difficulty, we'll be using 2 pedals from Dwarfcraft devices, and first we'll start off with the minivan. Remove your backplate and the original foot switch. Now you can desolder the foot switch or just cut them. Now again, we'll be using the MIDI fighter faceplate or a tape measure to measure your 1-inch area for the button. Mark your drill spot and drill your center point and your larger buttonhole. Pop in your button. Now as you can see, we had to use suger because our buttonhole was a little bit too big, so this will help keep it in place so it doesn't move around. You can see we also mounted our LED with suger because we had to remove it from the original circuit board. The relay circuit board from AMZ FX consists of a custom circuit board with a microprocessor and a relay, a resistor, a ceramic capacitor, a voltage regulator, and an electrolytic capacitor. Now here's the layout for soldering all the parts onto the PCB board. You want to make sure that the line of the latching relay is right next to the microprocessor. When you solder the microprocessor, you want to make sure that little indent is in the top left corner. Then your resistor. For the electrolytic capacitor, you want to make sure the negative side is facing towards the LED hole. Voltage regulator needs to be a backwards D. And lastly, the ceramic capacitor goes in the holes next to it. Now let's look at our connections. 9V will connect to the power of the pedal. L will connect to the positive of the LED. 1 ground connects to the ground of the lug. The other ground connects to one of the pins on the arcade button. Switch connects to the other pin of the arcade button. 1 and 6 are jumpered together. 2 is the input jack. 3 is the FX input. 4 is the FX output. And 5 is the output jack. Now let's solder on all of our connections to the PCB board. You can also daisy chain all of your grounds off of the lug nut. After you've soldered all your connections, let's seal them up and protect them from any shorts with some liquid electrical tape and suger. Put plenty of suger on the bottom of the PCB and you can mount that in any small nook or cranny you can find inside the pedal. Now plug it in and test it out. Now let's switch up those knobs with another 3D printed knob. You can put in the set screw and then tighten it back on. Now let's look at the other pedal from Dwarfcraft devices. This is the Great Destroyer. We wired this up the same exact way and we had to make sure to use plenty of suger to mount the board. We also inserted some rubber feet because this one didn't come with any. So again, after you've sealed that up, make sure to plug it in. It'll flash twice to show you the relay board is working. And you can hit it a few times and make sure it's on. Now let's replace the knobs. If your 3D printed knobs don't fit the knobs exactly, you can drill them out. Now let's move on to hard difficulty. Our first of 2 hard pedals, we'll be using the Janus from Walrus Audio. The reason these are hard is because they come with ribbon cables, which are a little bit trickier to work with. So we'll remove the back faceplate and the original foot switches. As you can see, they're ribboned onto a circuit board, so what we need to do is now remove the ribbon cable from the circuit board. I tried a few different ways, but a box cutter seemed to be the best to peel back the ribbon cable to expose the wires and cut them from the board. Now you can drill your holes. With these I had to go straight down. You couldn't move them left, right, anywhere because they would hit the circuit board. Then pop in your arcade buttons. As you can see, we're going to have to use 2 PCB relays for this one because there's 2 buttons. So solder your jumper wires onto the ribbon cables and your arcade buttons. Next, connect them to the relay PCB. Remove your LED from the circuit board completely. Now you can solder jumper cables to the pins of the LED and then solder the LED positive side to the relay board. And then you'll want to daisy chain the other one to the ground. Then seal all your connections with some liquid electrical tape. And mount your relay boards inside with some suger. You want to make sure no pins are touching through because otherwise it could cause a short. Now seal up the back of the enclosure, and let's remove our knobs. Now for the Janus, we laser engraved the knobs since they were printed in wood filament. We put the Walrus Audio logo on there, and then we actually stained them with some more navy stain. Now after you've added all your knobs, plug it in and make sure it works. Next we'll be using the particle pedal from Red Panda. Same as the others, we'll remove the foot switch, the back plate, and the original foot switch. As you can see, this is also a ribbon cable set, that's why it's in the hard difficulty. We'll do as we did with the last one and remove the foot switch, drill a bigger hole, straight back, make sure not to move because the circuit board on this one is really tight. We actually decided to remove the ribbon cable altogether so that we had plenty of extra room since this is very little room inside the particle pedal. Once you've inserted your arcade button, you want to solder on your connections and your jumper wires to your arcade button. And then solder jumper wires to each of the connections on the particle board. For particle connections, you'll be soldering particle pin 1 to the relay pad 2, particle pin 2 to relay pad 3 and 6, particle pad 3 to relay pad 1, particle pad 4 to relay pad 4, and particle pin 6 to relay pad 5. Now for the LED, we can't get to it because the circuit board's in the way, so we had to use a box cutter to disconnect the connections to it. And you want to make sure you cut completely through the copper and then jumper wire both of those connections. Alright guys, well I hope you picked up some good modding tips. Stay tuned to djtechtools.com for more tips, tricks, and DIY tutorials just like this one. Take care.